Well, welcome back, everybody, and this is our first plenary session. Um, the title of which is Dealing with a Nuclear North Korea. You know what, I must confess that actually, in our original planning, this particular plenary session was to be, I think, on the second day. But given the events of the past, or last week, I guess, to the day, we thought that we should actually shift this panel and make it the opening plenary session. A lot of people ask me how I planned it all, and I must say, I can't tell you the secret, but in all seriousness, this is really a topic that we've been grappling with, as Bob Galucci mentioned this morning, for, 20 years now? At least.
Yeah.
At least. And are we anywhere near what may be characterized as a solution is the issue before us. And I think to try to understand where we are, how we got here, and perhaps where we go from here, we have really gathered together some of the best strategists, intellectuals, and practitioners in this field. As you will notice from countries representing 5 of the 6 party talks. So we do have one country missing, but we'll try to guess what their intentions are. So let me start by briefly introducing our panelists, starting with my immediate left is Dr. Choi Gang, who is the Dean of the Planning and Assessment at the Korean National Diplomatic Activity. Formerly, he was a Senior Director for Policy Planning and Coordination in the National Security Council Secretariat, and he was Professor and Director General for American Studies at the Institute for Foreign Affairs and National Security, IFANS, for those of us in this field. So thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Chair.
for having me here.
Next to Dr. Che is Ambassador Indo Tetsuya, who is the Senior Adjunct Fellow of the Japan Institute of International Affairs. His previous positions include Director of the Korea Division of the Asian Affairs Bureau and Deputy Director General of the United Nations Bureau. And he was also the ambassador in charge of Japan-North Korea normalization talks. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador. To his left is Bob Galucci. Won't introduce him again. To his left is Dr. Vasily Miheyev, who is the Vice President of the Institute of World Economy and International Relations, or IMEMO for those of us in this field. His previous positions include the first Secretary of the Russian Embassy to North Korea. He was the Deputy Director of the Institute for Far Eastern Studies, and he was also the Director of the Asia Security Program at the Carnegie Moscow Center. And last but not least is Admiral Yang Yi. He is the former director of the Institute for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University of China. His previous positions included Executive Commanding Officer of a frigate, Foreign Affairs Division Chief, and Deputy Director General of the General Office of Naval Headquarters. So as you can see, we really have gathered together people of exceptional qualification and experience to address this issue. So let me start with the first question, or the opening comments. And the way we structure this is to really, again, to foster as much of a conversation as possible. We ask that our presenters to limit their first opening comments to maybe 5 to 7 minutes at most. But if I may also just ask you to perhaps address the issue that Bob Galucci brought up during his keynote speeches, because so much depends on how you read North Korean intentions. So if you can also say something about what you think is the ultimate intention of the North Koreans in developing the nuclear weapons, and then try to explain your position as to how we should deal with it. I think that would really help us along. So With that, why don't we start with Dr. Che?
Okay, thank you for having me here. I will speak for myself, so it's personal opinion and observation. The question you raised, I think this, what North Korea wants is kind of the Pakistani model to be recognized as a nuclear power state. Over the years, North Korean nuclear problem has become an integral part of North Korean problem. So unless we are able to solve North Korea problem, I don't think it's possible to solve North Korean nuclear issue. So we have to expand our scope of understanding of North Korean nuclear issue. So we have to link the North Korean nuclear issue with other WMD capabilities North Korea has pursued over the years. Actually, North Korea staged a long-range missile test last December 12th. So actually, 2 months later, they staged nuclear test. That means they are going to pursue this WMD capability as far as they can and to keep them as a kind of their own deterrent measures against outside the world. So unless we have the change of their mentality or their perspective on the outside the world or security assessment, I don't think we'll be able to solve the problem. So actually, I do not repeat all the things, but actually the situation has deteriorated gradually over the years. Our wishful thinking for the resolution of North Korean nuclear problems through diplomatic negotiation has been nullified by a series of North Korean provocations and North Korean behaviors over the years. So we have to, of course, we cannot accept North Korea as a nuclear power state, but unfortunately we have to recognize the fact that North Korea is a kind of de facto nuclear power state. So our assumption should be based upon that fact, and then based upon that, we have to develop our strategies and responses to the North Korean nuclear challenges. It seems to me that North Korean nuclear problem has at least 5 to 6 challenges. First, actually, nuclear proliferation possibility has increased over the years. I don't know whether the last nuclear test was uranium-based or plutonium-based. If it turns out to be uranium-based, I think we are entering into a whole new game here. So proliferation possibility has been increased over the years and will increase into the future. So we should think about these strategic challenges. That means North Korean threats has gone beyond the Korean Peninsula, beyond the Northeast Asian perspective. That's the first question. Actually, on second issue, I think I'd like to raise is actually because of North Korea's increased WMD capabilities, here on the Korean Peninsula, we cannot rule out the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons, or maybe in one way or another. So if North Korea perceives it has perceives the utility of using this nuclear card in peacetime or wartime or conflict, I think North Korea can have more options to play against outside the world. For example, so North Korea could believe in the fact that they could manipulate this escalation ladder in their own favor. So how we are going to prevent that kinds of provocative actions of North Korea by having that kinds of nuclear capabilities in their own hands. And related to a question or challenges like whether we will be able to control the conflict if there is one. So who has the control of the escalation ladder would be a quite challenging. So that leads to another question about what would be a more effective deterrent mechanism vis-a-vis North Korea. We should be more specific on this issue. Over the years, actually over the past several years, United States and South Korea have been discussing what we call extended nuclear deterrence issue. Now we are talking about tailored deterrence on the EDPC framework, but we have not seen any concrete measures up to now. So what kinds of concrete measures which will lead North Korea to believe they cannot achieve what they want to achieve in playing this game in peacetime or in conflictual time? And also the other question or challenges, it seems to me that there's a kind of disagreement among the countries in and around the Korean Peninsula in solving this issue. Of course, everybody agrees on that we have to resolve this North Korean nuclear issue, but some countries has put more emphasis on other priorities. For example, if I'm wrong, please correct me. It seems to me that China putting more emphasis on regime stability of North Korea rather than the denuclearization of North Korea. Over the years, there was kinds of suspicion on our side about whether the United States is really going to pursue denuclearization or the proliferation. There's some belief that the United States is rather pretty much concerned with the non-proliferation issue over the denuclearization issue. So how we can solve these priorities among the countries is very, very critical. And also, what are their understanding of the nature of the problem? So it seems to me that we have to read, because actually I cannot answer what are the real intentions of North Korea in developing the nuclear capability. There could be disagreement and maybe the common understanding. So we have to come back to the fundamental question: what are the nature of this problem, which would be the result of North Korean regime characteristics? So on the prescription, let me say something about this very abstract. I cannot give you any concrete answer to that. But actually, as I said before, our starting point is like we have to change our assumption about North Korean nuclear problem. North Korea is a de facto nuclear power. It's not going to give up nuclear weapon in near time. And North Korean nuclear capabilities and delivery capability will continue to increase. So based upon that, we have to think about how we are going to live with nuclear North Korea for a relatively long period of time. First, I think, of course, I have to emphasize, we have to think about the robust deterrent posture, which would deny North Korea from gaining any kinds of leverage in playing this nuclear game against others. So what I call comprehensive tailored deterrence posture, that would include military, diplomatic, economic, and intelligence areas. Second, I think that we have to think about this strengthening the PSI mechanism in and around the Korean Peninsula. And third aspect is like, of course, based upon this kinds of strong, robust deterrent posture, we can think about this kinds of engagement vis-a-vis the North Korea to bring about some changes from the bottoms. But it will take a long time than we expected. So I think we should be very patient, should be very focused on these measures. So how we are going to do it, I don't know. It depends about the responses. But actually, the process itself should be designed to limit or constrain North Korean options in the coming years. And final point, of course, I have to emphasize all 5 countries who are the participants in Six Party Talks should collaborate and coordinate among themselves. I think this, instead of talking about what kinds of measures and concrete measures we are going to take from this point of time, instead, we have to go back to fundamental question. What are the intentions? And what are the nature of the problem? What are the priorities? Then we can think about this, whether we are going to start these kinds of measures vis-a-vis North Korea or not. So unless we have that kind of common understanding about the nature of the problem and challenges imposed by this North Korean nuclear problem, we won't be able to solve the problem. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Che. Thanks very much. Thank you. I have a couple of questions, but we'll wait until we do the first round. Next, Ambassador Endo.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Japan, there are 2 diplomatic issues arising from the aftermath of World War II that still confront Japan, namely their conclusion of Japan-Russia peace treaty, resolving territorial issues between the 2 countries. The number 2, the normalization of diplomatic relations with North Korea. With respect to the latter, normalization between the 2 countries, I was involved myself for several years at one point in negotiations as a representative of the Japanese government. Japan has stipulated that resolution of the abduction issues and nuclear weapon issues is a prerequisite for the normalization of Japan-North Korea relations. Then North Korean Peninsula Energy Development Organization, namely KIDO, was established in 1995 by Japan, the United States, and South Korea as a compromise plan to resolve the nuclear issues. But that effort was frustrated when North Korea's uranium enrichment came to light. Proud of my role as one of the KIDO's founding fathers, I found this turn of events particularly unfortunate. The country is concerned subsequently undertook the Six Party Talks in search of a breakthrough in the North Korea nuclear crisis, but these talks were suspended before they produced any tangible results. At the same time, repeated missile launches and the nuclear testings of North Korea have worsened the situation. Although we do not necessarily have a clear picture of North Korea's nuclear missile development at present, it is believed that North Korea already possesses a considerable amount of plutonium and highly enriched uranium, and that the targeting accuracy of its medium range ballistic missiles has improved considerably. Some observers have been said that North Korea's long-range ballistic missiles are capable of reaching the United States mainland. North Korea's preoccupation at the moment is likely the miniaturization of nuclear warheads so that they can be lifted onto missiles. And success in this regard is likely just a matter of time. Then, Mr. Chairman, why does North Korea aspire to a nuclear arsenal? It seems to me domestically, this is likely in part to solidify the military support for the government. Diplomatically and militarily, North Korea would like to buttress its conventional military capabilities that have diminished relative to South Korea's due to economic difficulties to ensure regime survival by securing deterrence vis-à-vis the United States, to use nuclear weapons as a, so to speak, as a diplomatic card to bring the United States to the negotiating table and to bolster its national prestige. It seems to me, in my view, North Korea appears to have achieved a degree of success in these aims. In any case, it is exceedingly difficult, though not impossible, to convince a nuclear-armed state to abandon its nuclear weapons and missiles. And history offers us no precedent, perhaps other than South Africa. Although sanctions have been imposed on North Korea by United Nations and individual countries, the ties between North Korea and, to be frank with you, neighboring China have given North Korea a de facto way out that has allowed the country to hold up under the pressure. Given the tremendous difficulty of getting North Korea to abandon its nuclear weapons, the international community must either reliably guarantee North Korea extensive incentives or, contrarily, must impose extremely severe penalties. The former option might include major economic cooperation as a United States guarantee of regime survival in North Korea and the transformation of armistice agreement into a peace treaty. North Korea is particularly interested in regime survival, seems to me. But will this to be enough to convince North Korea to completely abandon its nuclear weapons? Should the latter option be exercised, the penalties would need to be imposed by the entire international community. Then, in this case, would China come on board for this? Whether the choice is made for incentives penalties, the international community must adopt a considerable, consistent policy from start to finish. The past, unfortunately, has seen not a few instances in which domestic political constellations may have caused, to be frank with you, the United States and South Korea, in particular, to waver in their policies. Having taken such bold policy approaches is by no means easy, with the ultimate aim of getting North Korea to completely abandon its nuclear weapon programs. Programmatic first step would be to achieve a freeze on nuclear weapon missile development to be monitored by IAEA and United Nations organizations. North Korea should be put on a notice that severe penalties will be incurred if it does something to cross a red line. Accordingly, Mr. Chairman, six-party talks among all countries concerned are an important forum for contact with North Korea, although their significance should not be overestimated. To ensure the six-party talks are fruitful, it is essential, particularly Japan, the United States, and South Korea, coordinate policies and urge China to abide by them. North Korea repeatedly resorts to brinkmanship diplomacy, but history has shown that it is nevertheless extremely cautious in a way in its behavior. It would be best for both the international community and the individual countries to keep lines of communication with North Korea open at all times. Mr. Chairman, in view of the concerns that the situation will grow even worse if North Korea nuclear weapon missile development moves forward, it will be not to do us to sit idly. At the very least, we must employ pressures and dialogue, namely sticks and carrot, to keep the situation from deteriorating. It seems to me the time, as far as nuclear weapons are concerned, time is on the North Korean side. We should not stay idly. Alongside Iran case, this is a test case for maintaining nuclear non-proliferation regime. Mr. Chairman, in concluding my speech, I just would like to summarize what I said very briefly. One, coordination among the countries concerned, particularly United States, Japan, South Korea, should be pursued. And policies towards North Korea should be consistently pursued. We should work together, particularly, as I said, North Korea, Japan, South Korea, United States should work and urge China to come together with us. We do need to employ sticks and carrot. Perhaps at this moment, sticks might be more necessary. So those are my summing up. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Ando. Now to Dr. Glucci.
I had thought of passing on this opportunity since I'd just taken a lot of your time, but I can't resist.
Yeah. I knew you couldn't.
So first, the question that I wanted to pose to everyone of what motivates the North Korean program, offense or defense, essentially, and the related question of whether were they to enter a negotiation, would they be willing to genuinely put the nuclear weapons program on the table as something they would be willing to give up. These are related, of course. But even as I was framing them, I was attracted to these questions, which is why I shared them with you this morning. I was thinking that it is a little bit like questions you very often hear in diplomacy. Someone will ask, so what does France think? Well, France actually doesn't think. I mean, there's a lot of people in France and who think a lot of different things. And so it's a shorthand we all recognize. And when we talk about North Korea, sometimes I think because North Korea doesn't have an active parliament, and it may be a complex leadership arrangement, it's much more hierarchical, that we can get away with the shorthand. But I am, now that I'm away from my prepared remarks, I am not absolutely confident that North Korea has a grand strategy, what we would call at the National War College, a grand strategy that they have been pursuing for the last 20. I don't know that they do. And so that I don't know that someone can definitively answer the questions I wanted us to pose. That's the first point. It's the limits of this intellectualizing over this. The second point is that if we were to find tomorrow morning an opportunity to have an exchange with the North Koreans that we thought was a serious exchange tomorrow morning or next month or 6 months from now, and we asked them if they would be prepared to put the nuclear weapons program on the table and, at least in theory, give it up in the context of a negotiation in which their true security objectives were met, if they said no, they weren't, I would say we'd have an answer. And at that point, as I indicated in my remarks, I would not be in favor of going into a negotiation. At that point, I would oppose negotiation, and I believe the best thing to do then would be for the United States to hunker down and to adopt a more containment policy, and to engage after being told no would be to legitimize the nuclear weapons program, and I'm very much opposed to that. On the other hand, suppose they said, much to, I'm sure, some people's surprise, yes. Well, then at least one of two things should be true. Either they would be telling us the truth and there would be a circumstance under which they'd be willing to give up the program, or they would be lying to us. I know that's hard for some of you to conceive, but it's just plausible. And in fact, if we look back at 1994 and the agreed framework, some people who were unkind to me would say that we already had that test. We did it 20 years ago, and that proved that they were lying to you then, that they weren't prepared to go with the program. I think the test was inadequate and was contaminated by the politics after the test, and we really don't know. So my posture is agnostic on this, and that's how I would approach this. The third point, and my penultimate point here, is that if you are an agnostic like I am, the one thing that you should not be agnostic about is your defense and deterrent posture. That has to be a posture that not only the North Koreans understand as unambiguous and unequivocal, but your populations, yours and ours, need to understand that way, that we are in this very strong position, and that's the only basis for entering a negotiation. My final point goes to Ambassador Endo's point about, people don't give up their nuclear weapons, and then you correctly put out, except for the South African case. Well, there were nuclear weapons programs, I can think of two in Asia, which started and stopped. I can think of two in Latin America, which started and stopped. And then there's South Africa. And then there were a couple in the former Soviet Union where countries gave up their nuclear weapons. So I don't mean this is easy. I wouldn't be approaching this with, I'm not going to use the word optimism. I wouldn't be approaching this saying this is an easy thing to pull off. But it's not without precedent. I think it's plausible. But that's a lot compared to what the alternatives may be. And I don't see very rich, appealing alternatives. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, Dr. Miev.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few points. First, the nuclear North Korea is absolutely unacceptable, neither for Russia or for other countries. So we should talk not about how to deal with North Korea, nuclear North Korea, but how to disarm nuclear North Korea. Second, I think that the last test means a turning point in the development of North Korean nuclear boom. Okay, they're still far away from making a modern nuclear bomb, but they made some progress. And this is very important. Third, why North Koreans did it? I think few reasons. Firstly, the new regime showed that it is not going to change and plans to continue the previous policy of Kim Jong-il. What was the policy? Its policy of nuclear blackmail. Their trick was very simple. They raise tension, get money, spend money, raise tension, and so on. But Obama administration and Lieberman administration stopped playing the game. And North Korea was facing economic difficulties. Now there are two new administrations in Washington and in Seoul, and they send a message to them. They say, look, we improved our nuclear weapons program, so you should return back to paying us for our promises to stop it. It's the first reason. Second reason, the test is directed for North Korean population. The economic situation is very poor, and like many socialist countries in the past, North Korean regime now explains to people why they live poor. They say, oh, it's because of American threat. We have to spend a lot of efforts for our defense capabilities. And the last, another aspect of this is that when last year Kim Jong-un took power, and when they failed in April last year to launch a missile, the perception of Kim Jong-un by people in North Korea was not very possible. Many of them thought, oh, it's not the right leader. Now, Kim Jong-un shows to people, no, I am the right leader because I can make missile and can make nuclear test. My next point, why Pyongyang is not afraid of anything. Also a few reasons. First, Pyongyang leadership are absolutely sure that contradictions among Russia, China, and the United States will continue, will exist forever, and that these contradictions will not allow three nuclear powers to coordinate their policy against North Korea. The second is that Pyongyang is not afraid of sanctions. There is no middle class in North Korea. There is no private businesses in North Korea. So sanctions cannot influence people's behavior in order to press upon leaders. And there are no mechanisms how people in North Korea can press upon leadership. Next, North Korea is sure that China, European Union, and Japan will never be ready for comprehensive sanctions. China is afraid that in this case, in case of real social collapse of the North Korea, a lot of refugees will go to Chinese territory. In European Union, very democratic, very liberal domestic legislation that doesn't allow to block North Korean banks which work with the party, North Korean party, Communist Party money. In Japan, the problem is Chonryon. It's also under domestic legislation, and Chonryon plays a role of financial window for Pyongyang, through which Pyongyang gets access to global financial system. So Pyongyang is not afraid of sanctions because thinks comprehensive sanctions impossible. So in such a situation, what can we do? Just and of course, theoretically, the best way to solve North Korean nuclear issue is to change regime in market and openness direction. But it's easy to say rather than to do. But what I think now is important. Three nuclear powers, the United States, Russia, and China, have common position on the North Korean nuclear test. Nuclear North Korea is not acceptable. It gives us a chance to try to maintain trilateral cooperation, not only on political, but also between our military people, and just to start to discuss the collective preemptive strike against nuclear sites. It will be a strong signal. On the other hand, we need to cooperate with, we have three countries to cooperate with Japan and South Korea in order to promote the total engagement policy. And we have a mechanism for this. we have six-party talks. And in the six-party mechanism, there are 5 groups. 4 groups cannot work without North Korea participation. But there is a 5th group. Russia is chair of this group. It's a group on Northeast Asia security and cooperation. Theoretically, we, 5 of us, we can meet and discuss issues in the framework of this group. Even if North Korea does not attend this meeting, it will strengthen that all our countries are together, and North Korean argument that our contradictions are forever is not so valuable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Admiral Yang Yi.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you have already asked us a very tough question. What is the real intention of DPRK? So we can only guess. Guess can be wrong. Guess can be right. But I think the best way to show, let's say, the real intention of DPRK, that is to invite a representative from DPRK to make a presentation here. But I want to ask you one question, which is not asked you to answer immediately. Have you sent an invitation to DPRK to join this forum? Maybe you have already sent, but maybe they
do not have a mail.
No, they are too busy to celebrate the success of a nuclear test.
Perhaps.
Okay, before I want to make the analysis on the Chinese policy on this issue, I want to tell you 2 stories. First, I served as naval attaché in U.S. for 5 years. I noticed there are many differences between China and U.S. and on many fields. But one thing that is how to bear the children. But in China, because we have a one-child policy, once we have a new baby, and the parents take all kind of care about the children. They take care of the children 24 hours, 24. Even they pay a lot of money to hire a very qualified babysitter. And even during the night, when the child moved, and they just take care of to touch him, the baby, and give him some milk and something like that. But well, in US, once the new baby was born, just put it in another room. The young mother just enjoy the good life with her husband in a separate room. But 2 outcomes of the children. So another story that is a true story of my family. Last summer, I have a daughter who has 2 boys, very naughty. And last summer, my second youngest grandson got a very bad fever, very bad, 40 degrees centigrade. And we went to the hospital and asked the care of the doctors. And doctor used all kind of antibiotic, the medicine, solid and liquid, failed. But one day, maybe a friend of mine told me, "Oh, there's a Chinese traditional medicine doctor there. We need to consult him." And we sent children there, and the doctor just told him, "Okay, no problem." He gave the prescriptions, only 4 recipes. And after take the second one, and the fever was gone. The reason for that fever is not the disease, but it's because the young boy ate too many McDonald's French chips. Okay, how do we make some response to the nuclear test of DPRK? I think the DPRK's provocation should be and has already been the target of the international community's unanimous condemnation. But some friend maybe blame China. You do not do enough job. Maybe you're not playing sufficiently your card against DPRK. It's not true. In fact, the Chinese government take a very firm position against this act, not only for the public statement, but we have been pursuing very silent profile but very firm engagement. We even made our last effort until the last minute, but unfortunately, we didn't succeed. We cannot defend DPRK as their lawyer, but we cannot dictate our will to them. It's a very naughty boy. There's no doubt that DPRK is making a mistake, but the escalating tension was brought about by various negative factors that have filled up since recent years. Miscalculations by relevant parties have also fueled the situation. What would run as? US, you have your responsibility. Japan, you have your responsibility. China, we have our responsibility. Assuming the DPRK become a nuclear power is not question for us, nonsense to discuss if it is or not a nuclear country. And assume they are already with a nuclear warhead in hand and potentially in the future have ballistic missile launching capabilities, which can reach the Washington, D.C. but in the coming years. But what kind of workable and effective response can the international community make? Well, will U.S. have the resolution, a determination to strike against the nuclear facilities, or you have the courage? I don't think President Obama have this courage to some kind of change. To have built some kind of new kind of relations with it. Would a new round of economic sanctions even tougher to force the DPRK to comply, to renounce their nuclear weapons, or to become a responsible nuclear power? I'm sure that most of the people in this among this audience agree with me. These are not the best alternatives. Do nothing and let the DPRK go away with immunity is absolutely not the case. We have to do something. But I'm confident that military action will bring more negative and then active, positive consequences. But now the situation come to a critical point, and strong recipe is needed to deal with both the symptom and root causes of the issue, just like Chinese tradition mentioned who treated my grandson. And a package solution is vital to find out a good solution of the Korean Peninsula crisis. We strongly urge, as always, the DPRK to honor his commitment to denuclearization and refrain from any move that may further worsen the situation. At the same time, all the parties, including the 5 country members of Six-Party Talk, we have to persist in effort to promote denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and Pyongyang's concern on security should be considered. Joint efforts of the major powers are critical at this moment. And particularly without cooperation and coordination of the major powers, the already tense situation could be even worse. To build a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula and maintain this peace, stability, and prosperity in this Korean Peninsula is the interest of all countries. I think I highly ask the people here that all major powers should behave decently at this critical time and do not play the geopolitical games and to promote their hidden agenda. I want to go to detail. The Six-Party Talk remains the most viable platform to reduce and reverse hostility. Is it time for parties concerned to act rationally to create favorable conditions to revive long-stalled Six-Party Talk and avoid disaster to fail out? Maybe we cannot get the best, but one thing is sure, that we can avoid the worst. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Between Dr. Chegang and Dr. Miev, I detect a slight difference in tone, and I'm not quite sure whether it's just tone or, but Dr. Che, you said that we need to now face the facts, and we need to start thinking about how to live with a nuclear North Korea in the long term. You said that that's not what we should be thinking about. We should be talking about how to disarm North Korea. Now, is there a difference here, or I mean, where do we stop? Where do we start? You know, to what extent are we talking about denuclearizing, and at what state do we? If the negotiations go long enough, I guess we're beginning to manage the situation rather than trying to resolve the situation. I mean, is there a difference in the strategy here that? Why don't I ask you first? Just
Ultimately, I think it is quite desirable to disarm North Korea, but actually whether North Korea is disarm itself, I think that there could be a kind of fundamental policy change. That would be conditioned by some kinds of regime transformation. So unless that kinds of change, I don't think it's possible to see the high possibility of disarming North Korea or denuclearizing North Korea. Of course, so actually, for example, Jonathan Pollack wrote a book about no exit. It's because actually the seize mentality of North Korea is engraved in regime itself. Unless it overcomes that kind of seize mentality or the fear of external environment, I don't think North Korea will be able to disarm. For example, actually, the other panelists already mentioned about we should offer North Korea, should understand or take into account North Korea's concern of security or the hostile policy of outside the world. But actually, North Korea has been offered several times about the peace declaration or the non-hostile intent by outside the world. But actually, it's been nullified. Just North Korea simply rejected that idea. We need more concrete things. But actually, that would be the case, because actually, it cannot overcome that kind of internal characteristic of North Korean regime by itself. So, of course, as you mentioned, I think there's a slight difference, but I don't know what would be the.
But Leslie, do you then agree that you will never denuclearize North Korea? The only way is for regime change.
No. I remember discussions about nuclear India, nuclear Pakistan. I think at that time the United States and Russia made a big mistake that they didn't make a strike against nuclear facilities in India. Why? Because it was the start of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. The logic of Russia and the United States are two nuclear superpowers. China is on the third place, far ahead of Great Britain and France. So from the logic of behavior of Russia as a responsible nuclear superpower, the non-proliferation issue is top priority. I talk about what should be done. Of course, in practice, it's not so easy, but we shouldn't forget that if we just stop, if we just begin to talk that, maybe North Korea not so big nuclear power, so okay, let's try to deal with it. It will be a big strike against non-proliferation regime. And for Russia as a responsible nuclear superpower, it's absolutely unacceptable. And one thing more, Russia and the United States, and despite of many difficulties, we have very strong cooperation in strategic stability. Strategic stability means nuclear and missile stability. And now we have plans to engage China in our dialogue on strategic stability. And North Korea in this can help us because the interests of our three countries are the same. No nuclear North Korea. It can be one of the topics of our trilateral cooperation if it starts. I hope it will start in the near future.
Thank you. Actually, I have a question also to Admiral Yang Yi and Ambassador Endo, which is, do you still believe that there is a big enough deal, whether it's a security guarantee or anything, that North Korea could accept in exchange for its nuclear program?
I believe it.
You do?
But I think the The most important that is the all party involved should coordinate and join their efforts. Do not have set their the other the agenda. For example, the disarmed DPRK's nuclear arsenal should be top priority for us, for everybody here. But we never let the DPRK to follow the example of the India. So, Bob, I have to criticize the U.S. once again. But on 1998, when the India and Pakistan have their nuclear explosion, and top 5, P5, already have some kind of joint action to condemn Indians and Pakistan's action. But unfortunately, U.S. made a very bad decision in 2001 when the 9/11 took place. You recognize the status quo of India as a nuclear power in exchange of support by India to U.S. anti-terror campaign. So now India and Pakistan became not declared recognized nuclear power, but de facto nuclear power. But the same thing cannot be repeated in the case of DPRK.
Ambassador Endo first, and then.
But, my thought is based upon on those two propositions. First, is time on their side, on our side, as far as nuclear development is concerned. And my guess or my thought is the time it might be on their side. They will continuously develop nuclear devices. That's one. So therefore, we should not sit idly. We should do something. That's one. Second is, do we expect nuclear weapon state, nuclear armed state, such as Korea and North Korea, will abandon nuclear devices? As Garuch said, you referred to Latin America. That's Brazil and Argentina. But they haven't developed yet. They are on the way. But are there any cases where nuclear armed states have given up?
Bob.
I don't think so. So in other words,
okay.
North Korea will stick to, as much as they can, to their nuclear weapons.
So do you think we can offer them a deal big enough that they can exchange?
But so therefore,
yeah.
We have to do something. Deal might be possible. Not immediately abolition of nuclear weapons, but on the way to abolition, there might be some on the way station.
I'm beginning to sound like Don Corleone. Is there a deal we can offer that they can't refuse?
I would love to answer that. It speaks to my Italian tradition. But there are a couple of other points that have been, Mr. Chairman, have been
Please, yeah.
rubbing around.
Really,
First, to my colleague who, with some hesitation, wanted to criticize the United States for the India deal. I would only encourage you, criticize. I thought that arrangement, that deal, was a huge mistake for the two parties and for the rest of the international community. So I join you in your criticism. Second, I thought I heard some enthusiasm for military action against countries that acquire nuclear weapons, and I think that has to be done with great concern and reservation. Third, there's been no comment so far about the transfer issue, which I wanted to point out, particularly in this audience, is a
Transfer of North Korean.
Transfer of North Korean nuclear technology, nuclear material, nuclear weapons, the kind of thing they did already with Syria, presents this overwhelming threat to more countries than the United States, but in a way, because we were such a target for international terrorism, largely to us. And I want to underline that that circumstance could plausibly to me create a casus belli, a reason for using force, plausibly. and so I regard it as something to be quite concerned about. On the question of is there a deal that can be made, I can't go beyond a position of agnosticism on that. I would like to think there would be, but but let me just take the alternate position for just 1 second, and then I'll stop. Suppose there isn't. Suppose there's no deal to be made, and suppose with great clarity, which would be unusual for this issue, the North Koreans said there isn't, and that was it. So that those people in this audience who, like me, have been accused of being incurable negotiators would have just nothing to do, as long as you take my position that if they will not put the nuclear weapons program on the table, you don't talk. We're done. Okay, what then? Is the ambassador correct? Well, time is on their side. I don't think so. Quite the contrary. As long as the American deterrent is in place, and I don't see it going anywhere, as long as there is a very clear capability of the South with the United States to provide a conventional defense of South Korea, I don't see what these nuclear weapons accumulating in the North does good for the North vis-a-vis South Korea, Japan, the United States, or the region, unless it provokes other bad things, such as a reconsideration of non-nuclear weapon status. So I'm not of the view that they are making great progress and we are losing right now. It's something I would like to stop, reverse, and remove, but I don't think they're going anywhere. And I don't think they have anything like a political or economic model that should give anyone a reason to believe that this is a regime with, let's say, promise.
Okay. I'm going to give Admiral Yang Yi and Professor Chegang a chance to respond very briefly, but afterwards I'm going to turn to the audience, so if you could have your questions ready. Admiral Yang Yi, you had two fingers.
Okay, I think the Japan and Russia have a very important role to play, but I think the key player in this matter is the U.S., ROK, and China. U.S. should have the courage to have a package solution in a deal, in a big deal, in exchange of the gifts with the Pyongyang. ROK, maybe you better to return to your sunshine policy to provide some kind of a condition for the soft landing of the DPRK. But China, maybe we have to contribute by the carrot and stick policy on some time. Thank you.
Professor Che.
Okay, actually, I do not advocate any kinds of offensive military options. Actually, I like to emphasize the deterrent and defensive posture, which will actually deny the utility of nuclear weapons in the hand of North Korea. So I think that would be the starting point. And second, I think that we should stop thinking about this. Other parties are playing the North Korean nuclear game from the geopolitical perspective. If we want to expand the problem to that dimension, actually that would alter the process, actually make some more frictions among the countries. For example, maybe China perceives North Korean nuclear issue from the US-China relations or intervening. So I think we should confine the scope of the problem, our responses, only to that aspect, North Korea, peninsula-wise problem. Of course, I said, of course, there's a great implication for regional and a global security perspective. But anyway, in dealing with that, we should not expand the North Korean nuclear issue to include the US, China, or other geopolitical dimension. So I think that is my response. Actually, it takes time if we want to denuclearize. Of course, I don't think it's possible to solve the problem overnight. So we should start the managing and capping the problem, and then we can think about how we can gradually change the situation in a more positive way. As I said, over the last 20 years, the situation has deteriorated, but we have to reverse the trends by having all participants on the same page, on the same paragraph, on the same sentence, even on the same line in dealing with North Korea. Of course, China was actually on the same page just right after the nuclear test, but actually it did not last long enough. So I think it's time for us to revisit the problem for the sake of each country's national interest, as the sake of peace and stability in the region. Thank you.
Okay, so we have microphones ready. And if you could briefly identify yourself and make your question really brief, Gareth Evans.
Gareth Evans from Australia. One question that hasn't really been answered this morning is, are we capable of taking yes for an answer from North Korea? If we do engage a policy, which I strongly believe in, of containment, heavy-duty deterrence, but keeping the door open for engagement. What is the kind of engagement that we could actually deliver on, not just on the North Korean side, but us? I say this because I'm still pretty seared by my experience as Australian Foreign Minister watching the follow-through of the Cato negotiation in the 90s, when frankly we dragged our feet. We dragged our feet on the normalisation of relations, which we were committed to. We dragged our feet on the supply of heavy fuel oil. We dragged our feet on the supply of the nuclear power plant installations, which we promised, because there was a belief that regime collapse was imminent, we could get away with it. My question, in short, and it's to Bob and it's to the Korean and Japanese friends in particular, what's really changed? We've got the congressional reality, or at least in the Senate in the US, and we've got the executive reality now in Japan and South Korea. Are we really going to be prepared to accept yes for an answer in the event that we could extract it?
We'll go in that order. Bob, Ambassador Endo, and Professor Chase, very quickly.
Very, very quickly, Gareth, I probably don't accept the proposition that we did so horribly on heavy fuel oil and reactor development. We didn't do as well as we should have, but not horribly. I think we did really poorly on is the thing that was most important to the North Koreans, and that was that political relationship, particularly with us, and that was just not happening. There was great opposition. Republicans took both houses of Congress in 1994, and it just wasn't happening for us. And so I think the North Koreans, I'm guessing, I don't know this for a fact, were very disappointed with the essential political element of the deal. What we could do now, I don't think we could do very much at all in terms of a political settlement with absent some real clarity on the removal of the nuclear issue. I said we shouldn't lead with that issue, but it has to be there. And if we don't get that domestically in the United States, I can't imagine a robust political settlement. We need that.
Okay. Ambassador Endo, would you like to?
Very quickly, the most important partner between the six parties, China. But so we have to urge China to come together with us. But it depends quite a lot on U.S.-China relationship and the Japan-China relationship. Particularly as far as the Japan-China relationship at the moment is not so far from good.
Can you offer, how much economic package, how big a package can Japan offer if, in exchange for normalization?
Well, as I said at the beginning, our normalization hinges upon two things, abduction and nuclear issues. So even if nuclear issues could be solved, abduction issues still remains. Then economic cooperation will come out. How much? We have never said anything at all. They never said any exact amount.
Yes, Professor.
Actually, the incoming administration, Park Geun-hye administration, has already put forward what is trust-building process on the Korean Peninsula. I assume it contains actually kinds of economic engagement policy toward North Korea, starting with the dialogue and then solving the social problems. I think that's, but actually, unless North Korea shows the intention to cooperate in solving this problem, I don't think this incoming administration will be able to start that kinds of package. Previous administration, Roh Moo-hyun and Kim Jong-un actually put forward that kind of economic package, but actually it was not able to solve the problem at all, actually only drag the process a little bit further. Of course, actually, Admiral Yang emphasized we have to come back to sunshine policy. Of course, the first principle in sunshine policy, we have to have robust, strong, determined posture. That was the point. The second, we will not observe North Korea. We want to have a peaceful coexistence with North Korea. Then the third point, we are going to engage North Korea from economic dimension to improve the relation between the two Koreas. So in Korea versus Sonny, Hunan, or Songyong, Hujong, that kind of policy was there. Actually, it seems there is a huge similarity between this incoming administration and the Kim Dae-jung administration in terms of North Korea policy. But actually, the situation is quite different. We have to put more emphasis on security aspect at this point of time. Thank you.
Okay. Martin?
Hello. Martin Fackler with the New York Times. and I'm speaking as a speaker, I'm not interviewing anybody here. I just wanted to broaden the discussion a little bit because we're talking about accepting North Korea perhaps as a de facto nuclear state. We're talking about how we have so few options. Maybe we can cut off, Kim Jong-un's cognac supply. I mean, it sounds like we really have our hands tied. Once a state reaches, like North Korea, reaches a certain level of nuclear capability. And that's an alarming, if that's true, that's an alarming conclusion because if you think about what message that sends to the rest of the world when we talk about international non-proliferation, it says if you can make a mad dash in nuclear development and get to a certain level, basically the world is helpless, right? And if you look at sort of the other model, like the Libyan model, right, where Gaddafi gave up his weapons, look where it got his program, look where it got him. It just seems like I don't know. It seems like non-proliferation looks rather toothless, and it doesn't give a very sort of optimistic assessment of what we can do. And I just wonder, if North Korea can pull it off, and we're basically helpless, Iran can do it. Anybody else could do it, right? I don't know. It doesn't seem to offer a very positive assessment.
Bob, you don't agree?
Well, I find the language, very pejorative. We're helpless. We can't do anything. We're deciding, as a sovereign state, we are the United States, we're not going to take independent sovereign action. Does anybody doubt that we could strike if we wished, and we could do grievous damage to any number of countries on the planet? But we make a decision that that's not consistent with our values and norms and our interests, frankly. So, and we do that in this context with our allies. South Korea is here too, right? So I don't see this helplessness. I see, and I don't see it as a mad dash by North Korea. They've been dashing since around 1982, or maybe even before that, depending on how you want to date it. They've been running for a long time in this direction. We watched in the slow motion Pakistan program, the slow motion India program. Right? We made efforts of various kinds to derail them. And they were not successful. Sometimes we have succeeded, not necessarily with nuclear weapons already in place. I mentioned before, a couple in Asia, a couple in Latin America, South Africa, a couple in former Soviet Union. So sometimes this works. But this is a matter of, to some degree, it's a matter of national sovereignty. The international community can decide, particularly when a country takes on international obligations like the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty commitments, not to do things that when they act inconsistent with those treaty obligations, then there is a justification for acting. And there is and has been in the North Korean case the basis for sanctions, as I understand it under international law. So the helpless imagery doesn't really work for me in terms of capability. It's a judgment that's made of what's prudent, what's in the best interest of each individual country and in that of our allies. So the characterization to me was flawed.
Okay, Okay, thanks. So we'll take, starting with Sharon, just take 3 questions from there together, and because we only have 5 minutes. So Sharon, then you, and then
Thank
Dr.
you,
Isaacs.
Sharon Squassoni from CSIS. So even though governments can tie themselves in knots, sometimes there's a way for civil society organizations to do things on a track 2 level. At this juncture, do you think that would be helpful or pointless?
My question is, Ken Brill from the United States, having heard all the powers here say they are opposed to a North Korean nuclear program, and hearing various expressions of firmness, if you go back to 1994 and see where North Korean technology and capabilities were, and look at it today, you can see that a number of things have slipped through the cracks. They don't make any of the things that they really need for a enrichment program, for example, or even for tests. They need to import an awful lot of stuff. And so why not begin to really focus on those aspects, those technologies, marriaging steel, other kinds of things that are needed very specifically for the nuclear program, and stop them? And in that regard, I'd be very interested in Admiral Yang's comments about Chinese firmness.
Yeah.
Tom Isaacs from the United States. So this has been a wonderful panel. Thank you very much. And I've come away with at least two conclusions based upon what I've heard. First is we really don't understand North Korea's motives. We don't understand their intentions. We don't understand what potential game-changing events might occur over time. But there will be some. And so we're in a position of a lack of certainty about what we're facing here, and therefore our levers for maneuvering things are somewhat limited. The second conclusion I come away with is independent of all the talk about working together and the various initiatives, if I were to plot nuclear risk from North Korea over time, I would say over the last 20 years, it's gone up in a fairly steady state. And so there's not a great view of confidence in my mind that there's a linkage between what we're doing and what the impacts are on North Korea going forward. So I really have a couple questions. We keep saying, a number of you saying, this is not acceptable. I want to know if you have a definition of what non-acceptable means. Because it seems to me if we allow this to continue, where we don't understand what's happening, we're taking limited measures, they're not particularly working, and we're saying it's not acceptable, it seems to me it loses its meaning at some point in time. And the second thing is, if you want to provide some incentives for North Korea, it really seems to me we have to get in the heads of what the North Koreans want, not what we think they ought to want. And if I was in North Korea, now we're crystal balling, if you offer things that are going to improve the quality of life in North Korea, it's not clear to me that that's something that the North Korean regime wants. Because if I'm a totalitarian nation, one thing we have learned through history is if the people's standard of living improves and they start to get hope, that can lead to unrest and great problems in those kinds of circumstances. So it's not clear to me what it is that we want to offer them that the regime would both find in their best interest and we would find in our best interest.
Thank you very much. We really need to end. We'll give you 30 seconds each to answer all the questions and summarize your viewpoint. Please, we start with Ambassador Yang.
Okay, tougher sanction can make the DPRK government, even their people, to suffer a lot. Yeah. Yeah, but we cannot change their course to develop their nuclear program. They will, at any prices, they will continue if the package solution cannot be in place. And the time is on their side, it's on the side of others.
Thank you. Vasily.
I think that the package deal is impossible. Why? Because for North Koreans, nuclear weapons is not a commodity which they want to sell once. They want to sell it again and again. And the only thing to solve the issue is peaceful regime change through engagement policy. The United States has wonderful, very successful experience of engagement in regard to the former Soviet Union. I think we should learn from it.
Thank you. Bob?
On the word unacceptable, I find the use of the word frequently unacceptable. But by that I mean that I don't think it's useful to say that if in fact you're going to live with something. I think it's useful to point out that we do have no intention of legitimizing the North Korean possession of nuclear weapons, which is a fact, or a factoid, a really big fact. Second, I think the question of whether there is a deal to be made, I would say for now the third time, I don't know, but I think the deal would be one that addressed North Korean basic security concerns. That's the kind of deal that at least plausibly could be made, but I don't know whether it can be.
Okay. Thank you. Ambassador.
I will respond to two questions. The one is about sanctions. Sanctions has got many aspects, but one aspect is economic pressure. The other one, political gesture. And the sanctions which you have been imposing on North Korea, some of them has been showing very effectiveness. And we would like to have, we have to think about financial sanctions against North Korea as future tactics. The second one about deal, I think incentives, in order to have a deal, I think incentives or disincentives have to be considered. Incentives would work. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chegang.
Okay, about this, how we can cut off the supply of the technology and materials, I think we should strengthen this, the PSI measures in and around the Korean Peninsula is possible. But I think that we have been, that's not been, I think that's not been the case. So I think we need to have more control of the sensitive material coming into North Korea. That is the one. Actually, about the unacceptableness, actually, why we are saying that unacceptable, our saying must be followed by more concrete actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the things that I'm coming away with from this opening session is that it's not just that we don't know. The problem isn't just that we don't know what the North Koreans are thinking. I think the bigger problem, perhaps, is that we don't agree on what we think the North Koreans are thinking. I don't think we even agree on the history of how we have been dealing with North Korea. And there seems to be a lot of difference in opinion just in how we got here. And so it makes it all the more difficult for us to have a joint voice on how we go forward from here. So I think the important thing is we sort of begin to build a consensus on what exactly got us to this point and how. And then I think if we have a coherent vantage point, a policy of amongst us, then I think whether we read the North Korean intentions rightly or wrongly, we can at least have a consistent joint policy forward, and that may be the best thing that we can hope for in at least the short to medium term. Anyways, please join me in thanking this wonderful panel for the opening session. Thanks very much.